Welcome, I'm Vincent McCorian. This is Africa 54. We begin tonight with our team coverage of Africa votes. First, let's go to Mali, where partial results show former Prime Minister Ibrahim Boubacar Keita is leading and may win an outright victory for president. Election officials say Mr. Keita is comfortably ahead with 1/3 of the votes counted. If he maintains this margin, there will be no need for a runoff vote. Mr. Keita and another Prime Minister, Modibo Sidibé, were considered the front runners in Sunday's election, the first step toward the country's recovery from a year and a half of unrest. Full provisional results could be released late Wednesday or Thursday. Viewers, Anne Luke was in Mali for the election and is watching the vote count for our bureau in Dakar, Senegal. Welcome, Anne.
Hi, Vincent.
Now, first, looking at the provisional results and projections that Mr. Keita might actually win this election, any surprise?
You know, it's not that surprising. I mean, on the day of the vote, I was going around to polling places during the vote count, and he was definitely hearing his name quite a bit as the ballots were being read. And also, too, I mean, even heading into this election, he was a strong front runner. Keep in mind, there are kind of two main political camps. There's Keita's camp, who was the longtime opponent to the regime that was ousted in the March 2012 coup. And then there's another camp called the FDR, and they're kind of a political coalition of parties that were more or less allied with that ousted regime. And that political coalition presented a multitude of candidates in this first round. So it's not very surprising that they kind of divvied up the vote and that Keita was able to push ahead.
Now, from what you heard on the streets, is this all about the individuals, the candidates, or is it about the composition of these parties?
I think it's a little bit of both. All the candidates were pretty much saying the same things. This is an election to get the country out of crisis. So, the to-do list is pretty basic, is pretty obvious. But I think Ibrahim Boubacar Keita is known among Malians. He has this reputation for being a tough guy, for being a, say it like it is kind of guy. And he was very outspoken in his opposition to how the previous regime was handling certain issues, including issues in the north, a previous Tuareg rebellion, all of which were things that eventually came and, fed into this crisis that began last year. So I think
most
this is a good moment for him.
Okay, most people actually have been focusing on the crisis in the north, but what do the Malian voters really want from the next president, from the next government?
Aside from the north, aside from peace, security, stability, two big things that people talk to me about in the south were fighting corruption, this kind of widespread endemic corruption that had really taken over the Malian government and public services. And the other one I heard quite a bit was to reform the education system. A lot of young voters are really upset with constant strikes, with issues in the quality of education, particularly at the higher levels. So, that was a bit of a surprise for me, but I did hear that quite a bit.
Yes. Now, many people were surprised that actually there was no violence, especially in places like Kidal, while those fears exaggerated, especially from the external perspective, or were they real?
I think it was just a great unknown. I think nobody knew. We saw unprecedented violence, unprecedented conflict in this country over the past year. So, and then we have seen these suicide bombings, these jihadist attacks in the north. We've seen, little sparks of violence in Kidal, little issues, intercommunal issues. And so I think nobody knew. That said, the security deployment was pretty heavy on election day. So I guess it'd be impossible to say, had that deployment not been so heavy, had they not been so on the job, maybe we would have seen problems. It's impossible to say.
Well, thank you very much, Anne. We'll be looking closely at the final results. And look there, reporting for us from Dakar.